In the previous part, Mr. Lee said that the daughter of Mr. Trin Hutin would not be able to live, which made him angry and shouted. He wanted to attack Mr. Lee, but he was stopped by Ms. Kong Man, who said, "Mr. Trin, calm down, please. This is a school, what are you trying to do?" And Mr. Trin Hutin yelled, "You bastard." And Mr. Lee was not happy either. How could he be happy when someone cursed him? Mr. Lee muttered to himself that he should have known about his reaction earlier. Maybe he already knew it in his heart. And Mr. Trin Hutin clenched his teeth and said loudly, "This is nonsense. I want to tear your mouth apart." And the little girl was scared and hid behind the door, looking at them. She said, "Papa." And then Mr. Lee also looked sleepy and said, "So what? Do you really not remember what I can do?" Mr. Trin Hutin was surprised to hear that and sweated nervously without saying anything. He was silent for a while and then turned away. He glanced at Mr. Lee and said, "Stay away, and don't let me see you again." He walked towards the door and said, "Nana, let's go." The girl also answered, "Yes." After Mr. Trin Hutin left, Ms. Kong Man looked at Mr. Lee with a confused and worried face and said, "Mr. Lee, do you know him?" Mr. Lee heard that and was also silent for a while. Then he said, "I had some trouble with him before. Maybe it's because of Robert that I got into trouble." And on the other side, the father and daughter had gone out and walked hand in hand on the sidewalk. The girl said, "Papa, who is that handsome man?" The father also stuttered and said, "Don't mind him, he is a bad luck guy." "Hey Nana, what do you want to eat? How about I buy some fish for you tonight? Do you like fish?" She said, "Yes." Then a voice said, "Hello, Mr. Trin Teen, what's wrong? Why are you walking like that? Anyway, we are old acquaintances after all. Why don't you sit down and talk with me for a while?" And Mr. Trin Hutin saw Mr. Lee now like that and had a worried and scared expression on his face. He honestly said, "I'm shocked. You are so different from before." Then he shouted loudly, "Don't talk to me. I'm surprised to hear that from you." He opened his eyes wide and ignored him. Then he looked at his daughter and said in a normal voice, "Don't say that in front of my daughter." And the girl Nana was scared and hugged his leg. Then he said to him, "Do you know? Before those words came out of your mouth, I still had some illusions. You really have that power. The reason you came here is probably just to see the people at the bottom of society and confirm their sadness. So please be quiet." Hearing Mr. Lee say that, he also just kept silent and didn't say anything. Then he continued to walk step by step and said goodbye. Mr. Lee felt uncomfortable when he met the stubborn man who didn't want his help. Then they arrived at a familiar restaurant where Mr. Trin Hutin often went to eat food. Then the staff's voice said, "The chicken rice of the father and daughter is here. Please enjoy." And he patted his daughter's back and said, "I'm sorry Nana. I'm sorry. I was a bit off script today. So let's eat chicken rice today." The girl Nana heard that and also said something. It seemed that she was sad about her situation. Then he saw his child unhappy and said, "Are you angry with Dad? Go ahead and don't worry, Papa will surely." He didn't finish his sentence when the little girl exclaimed "Papa." Her expression was a bit sad and there were tears in her eyes. She asked if she was a girl, was she going to die? He heard her words as if he was frozen, then quickly regained his composure, quickly stood up excitedly and grabbed her frail shoulders and said, "What are you talking about? Don't believe those nonsense things. Dad promises Dad will definitely cure that little disease of yours. Papa will try to make money to buy delicious food and treat you." Then the little girl said that Dad didn't need to say that. She knew she had a rare heart disease, and it was definitely incurable. He heard his daughter say that and was very surprised and amazed, then said, Who told you that?" Then muttered to himself that the doctor only told me alone. How did this child know? Then the little girl said that before, her parents had told her about it, before her mother left her. That night, Mom also made chicken feet for her. He heard the little girl say that as if he was frozen. Then he said to the little girl, "Nana, do you know, there is a kind of fairy still existing in the world. He can bring health, happiness, and beauty to healthy children." Now this god has chosen Nana, the shadow of someone hiding in a corner watching them, and the little girl exclaimed, "Really? What kind of fairy tale is this, Dad? Please tell me quickly." "Listen carefully, his name is Sangwo Kami, and he will surely help Nana." On the other side, Dad sighed but didn't say anything. He was probably thinking he would say, "Haha." On the teacher's side, there was Calm Man. She was walking up the stairs to prepare for her lesson, opened the door, and walked into the classroom. The students obediently looked at the teacher. Then, she was startled and very surprised because the whole class was quiet. She exclaimed, "Oh my." Then a boy asked, "Teacher Kong, how did you make yourself younger like that? Did you go for beauty treatments or something?" Teacher Kong Man felt very uncomfortable when she heard that, and there were kids below laughing happily. She then said, "Ha! What nonsense is that? Turn to page 16 of the textbook and copy it for me." She muttered to herself, thinking that maybe she hadn't fully recovered to her original shape yet. The two kids continued to laugh and said, "Whether you've had a facelift or not, I don't know, but I feel much younger than my grandmother." "Teacher, have you had a facelift yet? My mom says eating carrots can make you look younger." Another student chimed in, "Huh, really? My mom says using oil can do that too." "Teacher, I need to use the restroom." "Me too." Teacher Kong Man felt like the classroom had turned into a noisy market, and it was lively. She frowned and closed her eyes to endure it while the students kept talking. Then, one of the students said, "Surely she ate a devil fruit, right?" "Really? Do you guys know? My dad says he's handsome, but women don't believe him." Another student suggested, "Let's go to the internet tonight and play Sue, okay?" When Tiger reached his limit of endurance, he shouted, "Shut up, all of you. Turn to page 16 of the textbook immediately." The whole class was startled by his voice, and they quieted down for a few seconds. Another student said, "Her temper is still as scary as ever, right?" Others agreed, saying, Yes, it is." Then, Mr. Lee's shadow outside the window looked into the classroom, and there was a voice from Teacher Kong Man saying, "Lu Dai Swang, you talk so much. You must remember the first paragraph, right? Come up here and write it on the board for me, okay?" Dai Swang asked, "Huh, why is it me, Teacher Kong?" She replied, "Hurry up." Mr. Lee looked through the window and whispered to himself, "Now she's not only a teacher but also a bit easygoing and a bit scary." Then Mr. Lee glanced over at the students and saw a girl who was languishing at the back of the class. Mr. Lee looked up. He used his time to check the information of that girl. A watch appeared. The information of this listless girl was a bit messy, like a snail. Her name was Nana, she was 5 years old, and she had 5/29 days left to live. At 13:42, Mr. Lee looked at this information and was not very surprised. But a few seconds later, Mr. Lee quickly changed his expression. He was shocked and scared. Because Mr. Lee was in the process of viewing the information of the girl, he saw that her information changed quickly. It went from 5 months and 29 days to only 23 hours and 42 minutes left. Mr. Lee stopped and did not understand what was going on. He kept guessing. Mr. Lee muttered to himself why the girl's lifespan suddenly decreased so much. Then he did not know how many minutes passed before the bell rang for the end of class. Then Ms. Kong Man said, "That's it, your task now is to get out of the class, teacher." The students said, "Thank you, teacher, you worked hard." There was also a young man who wore a backpack and showed off a ball. He said, "Hey, let's go play soccer." "Where did you get that soccer ball? Can you let me see it?" Then maybe because of bad luck, they fought for the ball. A boy bumped into the weak Nana girl, or maybe the ball was about to hit Nana, so the boy came to block it. Another boy raised his hand and said, "Oh, sorry Nana." Then Nana started to tremble all over, her face pale, and clenched her teeth. She touched her chest, maybe her heart disease relapsed. The other kids said, Nana, what's wrong with you? You look weird." Teacher Nana fainted. Ms. Kongman also turned around and was surprised. She immediately had two guys come in and say, "Hurry up, make way." "Who is the patient?" The students and Ms. Kongman guessed that Mr. Lee had called an ambulance. Mr. Lee was outside leaning against the wall and said, "I called an ambulance. I temporarily stopped time in this area for a child. Because the fate of that child was suddenly disrupted, she only had less than a day to live." Ms. Kongman heard that and was shocked. She said, "What? She only has less than a day left?" Then they went together to the hospital to save the girl in the emergency area. Emergency, the doctor sighed and walked out of the emergency room. There was also a nameplate fairy who was working as a bricklayer who heard the news and ran to the hospital as fast as he could. The doctor said that fear was only a small factor for this attack. The main reason was that the child did not receive proper treatment, and also did not pay attention to taking medicine regularly. And who is the relative of the patient? Where are the parents of the child? Why did they come late at this time? Not here yet, he could not breathe properly. Then the nameplate fairy exclaimed, "Where's my Nana? How is she?" The three others also paid attention to the nameplate fairy. He saw Mr. Lee and became even more confused. He exclaimed, "Mr. Lee. Big brother, are you? That Mr. Lee guy. I know every time I meet you nothing good will happen. Tell me, what did you do to my Nana, huh?" He was crazy and agitated, so Mr. Lee punched him, and his helmet flew off. The fairy doctor was thrown against a door, and the doctor behind him raised his hand, exclaiming, "This is a hospital, don't cause trouble like that." The arrogant girl also shouted at Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee stepped in front of him and said, "Calm down, Mr. Fairy. The doctor was about to tell you about the surgery for the child. Do you want to come here and listen, or go crazy?" "Mr. Fairy, since you are the father of the child, I won't beat around the bush. I'll tell you straight, your child has only 23 hours to live. You decide what to do," said the doctor who wasn't finished. Another doctor added, "Sir, please don't give the patient a conclusion without permission." The arrogant girl also glanced at the doctor and said, "The patient's condition needs to be professionally evaluated." Because she spoke very accurately, Mr. Lee stopped time, the colors around them distorted. The arrogant girl also noticed that everything had stopped, except for the three of them. Mr. Lee held a shining watch. Even Mr. Fairy was surprised and looked around. Mr. Lee continued, "The doctor has requested surgery as soon as possible. As for the cost, you'll need to figure that out. Maybe you'll need a lot of money for the surgery. I assume you have some savings, right? Why are you looking at me like that? Don't tell me you spent all the money I gave you earlier?" Upon hearing Mr. Lee's question, he looked at Mr. Lee and said nothing. He was silent for a while, then laughed and said, "You're absolutely right." He cried and continued, "I've been reckless with my spending. I earn 10 dong and spend 12 dong." The arrogant girl chimed in, "Nana's father, I always thought I was rich enough and very happy. If one person eats well, the whole family won't go hungry. I thought that having money meant I could spend it freely, that I didn't need to plan for the future, and that living for today and not worrying about tomorrow was fine. I've been so wrong. I exchanged those months of luxury for my current misery. I've squandered everything. The money I spend daily is hard-earned through sweat and tears, and when I really need it, it's not there. After meeting Nana, my daughter, who calls me dad with an FA like mine, I felt like a father, and I changed. I really changed, but it's too late now, seeing her condition deteriorating. But I can't do anything, I'm useless." He screamed and cried loudly. I don't know what people think, especially you men who have supported your families." Mr. Lee looked at him as he cried but said nothing. He then closed his eyes and said, "In reality, it's not that you have no way out or no chance. I don't mind helping you out in an emergency, but you should also know that my generosity isn't free. Do you understand?" Mr. Fairy heard this and stopped crying. And very surprisingly, he said what his intention was. He wanted to buy me. "So, are you willing to sacrifice your time for money? Or do you just want to earn this huge amount of money by moving bricks? Well, that's your choice. I won't force you, Mr. Trin, but you don't have to feel too much psychological pressure. I understand your situation. This girl has no blood relation with you. So you don't have to trade your time to save a child who is not related to you." "That's right, you are right. That child was born from a stranger that I don't know. But she called me Dad. So she is my biological daughter. That's why I have to save her. Mr. Luke, please help me." The operating room. Outside the payment hall, it was very noisy and bustling. Maybe Mr. Lee had paid the fee with his card. And the nameless immortal sat on the patient's chair. He looked somewhere and said that you don't have to worry. Mr. Lee's money can last for a while. But, the next treatment costs, I can only hope that by then, my lifespan will not depreciate. Mr. Lee looked out the window at the grass and trees. Maybe Mr. Lee had paid the fee, but it must have cost a lot of money. And the nameless immortal looked at Mr. Lee and whispered that 2 years ago, if I had listened to him and used that money for something practical, then I wouldn't be in such a dilemma now, right? I have to treat my daughter as soon as possible. Can I buy regret pills? 2 years ago, the nameless immortal still ate normally. The boss gave him most of the fried noodles with sausages, eggs and spices, and also gave him 2 bottles of cold beer. You are here, look at you, did you stay up all night? Damn it, can you understand the feeling of living a luxurious life, spending money without looking at the price? Luxury is really good. And I'm so rich that I have to go down to the bank to check my account balance, but there are fewer and fewer people coming to your shop, right? Shut up, you are bluffing again. What are you pretending to be tired of? If you don't have money, just say you don't have money and stop being checked. Pretending to be rich, when you take a hot bath without money, see who will run to me and borrow money from me. I pretend to be rich, and you pretend to be blind, a perfect couple. Stop talking nonsense, go cook for me. Then there was a sound of opening the door outside. And Mr. Trin Hutin also looked up and exclaimed that damn it, man, my poor little temple finally has a guest at this time. It was Nana girl. She wore a thin coat and was dirty all over her body. She must have been hungry and smelled the food, so she came in. The father-daughter fate of the Trin family started from this moment. He thought it was a big customer like a little orphan girl or abandoned girl who came to Mr. Trin Hutin's dining table. And she sat down on the chair obediently. The girl didn't say anything and lowered her head to look at the table. As for Trin Hutin, he was confused and didn't know what to do. He muttered to himself, what should I do now? Why is there a child here all of a sudden? Then he decided to take the initiative to talk to the little girl. Hey, kid. Then the girl Nana also exclaimed, Uncle, I'm hungry. He heard that and made a dumbfounded face. He said, What? What did you say? Then he angrily said loudly, That's not my problem. Do we know each other? You should go find your parents at this time of night. Then the bald shop owner with one eye covered brought up a hamburger and some fries. He said, This kid started wandering on this street a week ago. I felt sorry for her and gave her some bread, but since then she comes here every day to beg for food. Then the shop owner brought out another plate of fat chicken. He continued, But you know, I'm not a charity worker. I also asked around about this kid's parents on the street. I heard some ugly painters say that this kid is not an orphan at all. Maybe because this kid has a heart problem, Her parents only care about her brother and refuse to pay for her treatment. They let her die on the street. Some people also took this kid to her parents' house, but they thought everything was fine and came back the next day. Trin Hutin heard that and also worried about something. He muttered to himself, could it be that I will become a rooster raising a chick? The girl Nana looked at the chicken in front of her with greedy eyes and drooled. The shop owner was so angry that he wanted to swallow a pill. He said, this kid's parents must be wishing that she would get hit by a car or be taken away by someone else. It would be better for this kid to have no parents like them. He said to his friend, I didn't expect you to be such a compassionate Buddhist monk. This time, you are really generous. What day is it today? I'm so lucky to have a meal. He said, what are you talking about? What are you saying? Don't flatter me with your sweet words. In the end, he was just a chef who did business, so the so-called immortal immediately spat out the chicken leg and exclaimed, you are so kind, brother. Then I can't refuse your kindness. Give me 2 more bottles of cold beer, living Buddha. The total was 128 yuan, please pay in advance, the immortal said and was shocked. He quickly put down the chicken leg and shouted, I have returned it to you, I didn't order this. I only ordered fried noodles. You didn't order it, look, everything is on the table, no need for anything else. Do you want to break up or not? Pay quickly. What do you mean? I didn't order chicken, you are robbing me blatantly, shut up, you are talking nonsense. Didn't you say you have a lot of money? Pay me quickly. After attacking the chicken reluctantly, the immortal walked on the road. He must have spent all the money he sold his lifespan for, so he was stingy with the chicken. He also met a bald gangster who had no customers. Damn it, the money for a few days of internet use is gone. That bastard doesn't know his number. If I couldn't beat him, I would have paid him to go see naked chickens. After talking nonsense, he looked behind him and said, it was the little girl Nana who followed him. The girl looked at him and said nothing, looking a little pitiful. Then the immortal coldly said, hey kid, I already gave you dinner. Why are you following me? Aren't you afraid I'll kidnap you and sell you to China for money? Don't follow me anymore. I really like cute kids, especially girls like you. And I'm also a perverted uncle who likes to beat and bully kids. Don't you run away? The girl heard that and wanted to cry. She said hesitantly, but, I want to go home from here. That's good for you. Remember not to follow me anymore. The girl heard that and nodded. She said she probably went the same way as the immortal. Time passed and the street lights were still on. It was probably midnight or near dawn. The immortal probably went to the internet cafe or something. But there was a red sign saying that minors were not allowed to enter or something. He seemed very comfortable and refreshed. This was a good hit. He would go take a bath and massage later. Another perfect day. Oh my God, there is still money left. Then he lit a cigarette and warmed his lungs when he heard a voice echoing out, what the hell did you do? Tell me, are you in any group? Are you trying to piss me off? It was a woman's loud voice. And the little girl Nana, the immortal, also observed them. The woman said, you just mixed something good outside and then came back to eat outside, right? It's not, it's uncle, that uncle, you lied again, didn't you? Look at your mouth, it's full of evidence, you didn't even wipe your mouth clean after eating something delicious. And that so-called immortal saw that and muttered that the little girl who ate the skewer was so small, and the old lady looked at her angrily and went crazy with a beautiful child, right? No one says anything means you agree, she's too old to say that it wasn't me who said that you have to give something to your brother first and later, he eats the leftovers and then you can eat, look at yourself. You are sick and you can't live long, why can't you be obedient and listen to me? You have to invest in your brother while you can, it's all because of you that your father got angry with me, and it affected your sister too, are you satisfied? The little girl Nana heard that and calmly said, "That man is not my father. That kid is not my brother either." She heard those words from the mouth of a little girl and was shocked and speechless. Then, under the watchful eye of the immortal, the poor little Nana was thrown away by her mother like throwing an object. The little girl was dragged on the ground by friction. She didn't have a bit of guilt in her eyes when she did that, but instead said, "Your morals and your way of talking are no different from that bastard. I'm really disappointed that I gave birth to you. It was a waste of time to be pregnant and have you." Then, the immortal couldn't bear it any longer and exclaimed, "Please, be quiet. What's all this noise about, for heaven's sake?" The sudden outburst startled her, and she began to sweat profusely as she looked towards the source of the voice. There stood an enraged man, pointing his finger at her face and saying, "How can there be a mother like you in this world? Why do people like you still exist? I wonder if wild dogs have torn your heart apart." The girl named Nana also sat up, feeling insulted and stressed. "Who are you?" she demanded. "What business is it of yours? I don't give a damn about your family's issues. It's your foul mouth that stinks up the entire street. You don't understand a thing. Get out of here and stop meddling in other people's affairs. I can see clearly that you're nothing but a neglectful mother who abandoned her child." The woman was taken aback, now facing someone even more unhinged than herself. All she could manage was a feeble response, You, before the man continued, "Do you even know what kind of person you are? You're just an irresponsible mother, capable of giving birth to children but incapable of fulfilling the duties of motherhood. Our country should have a new law to deal with parents like you, either evict you from your homes or throw you in jail. People like you are a waste of life, a disgrace to our nation and humanity. Even wild animals don't forsake their young, and yet you're worse than animals. Can you hear me?" "You may be right," the woman admitted, her anger giving way to a more rational tone. "I may be flawed, but are you any better? Can you raise the sun, nurture the trees, or care for this sick child? If you think you're so good, then take charge of it. I can do it if you give it to me. I have the means. I have the right." Her outburst had been passionate and uncontrolled, and the man, who called himself the real name Fairy, took it as an opportunity. He decided to care for the child as if she were his own daughter, and this was how their unusual relationship began. After explaining his story to Mr. Lee and Teacher Kong Man, the teacher pondered the situation while Mr. Lee remained silent, crossing his arms. The official fairy stated that they simply wanted to escape the overwhelming burden of caring for their sick child. They likely considered it absurd to think of me as a fool. Did they regret taking on the responsibility of caring for the child after I offered to help and relieve them of that burden? I regretted it immensely. It would have been wonderful if the idea of taking in and caring for the child had never crossed my mind. Perhaps I was naive, and I still had my own problems to deal with. Mr. Lee also empathized with this sentiment, likening it to a gambler taking on the care of a child, and he acknowledged that it was a clever move. After Mr. Lee finished speaking, the atmosphere grew silent. The official fairy then mentioned that, at first, they felt like their whole world was about to crumble because they couldn't visit the internet cafe, making it seem as if they were being forced to abandon their hobby abruptly. Since I couldn't provide any evidence of our relationship, we had to stay in a modest hotel for 30 yuan or occasionally buy her some snacks. I still vividly remember the way the boss glared at me when I paid for the cinnamon rolls, mainly because I was unaware of their high price. So, did you ever consider letting go of this responsibility? I thought about it many times. I contemplated taking the child to the police station. However, on one occasion, my daughter asked me, "Uncle, will you really send me back there once you've made up your mind?" Hearing that, Mr. Lee commented, "Your transformation surprised me." The official fairy responded, "You'll understand my feelings when you have a child." Mr. Lee fell silent, then added, "Having said that, I don't have the means to cover the surgery expenses. Food and lodging costs are still a concern." He paused for a moment and continued, In that case, I'll offer my time as payment. Will you accept my offer? Mr. Lee was also taken aback and surprised, not expecting to be able to contribute his time to help a child who had no biological connection to him. In reality, not everyone would be willing to sacrifice 10 years of their life for 10 billion. Mr. Lee adjusted his glasses and said, "All right then." He retrieved a glowing watch. The official fairy appeared a bit concerned and asked, "Mr. Lee, are you truly serious? Is this even possible?" Mr. Lee replied, "You've heard Mr. Trin's proposed love agreement, so I have no reason to refuse. Isn't that right, Mr. Trin?" Upon hearing Mr. Lee's affirmation, the official fairy exclaimed, "Yes, let's do it. I'm ready." As for Mr. Lee, his expression shifted. He smiled wickedly. His lifespan information appeared. His name was Trin Hutin, 46 years old, with 30 years, 114 days and 50 minutes left. Then Mr. Lee said, "Let's calculate it based on your annual income and then follow the rules of the contract. I will suck it out of your hand, 5 years, no problem, right?" Hearing Mr. Lee say that, Trin Hutin also agreed. "Let's do it." Mr. Lee let him fly up. Mr. Lee said, "Oh right, or this time, do you want to consider how much balance you have left in your lifespan?" "It's better not to do that, sir, in case something slips out of my mouth, it's not good." Mr. Lee also smiled and didn't say anything. Mr. Lee had something in mind, holding the time watch in his hand. Then Trin Hutin was brought down by Mr. Lee. He could feel his condition. Nothing changed even though Mr. Lee said he would take out 5 years and he would have 25 years left. He looked at his hands and feet and exclaimed, "What is this? It feels like nothing has changed at all, Mr. Lee. Is my lifespan really shorter? Where are the people? Where are they all gone? Where are they?" Mr. Lee had gone into the patient's room where the little girl Nana was staying. Mr. Lee said that it was hard to say that this was his misfortune. Mr. Lee was looking at the little girl Nana lying on the hospital bed. Mr. Lee said that he was still lucky. "Now, let's make a deal with you, kid." He didn't know what Mr. Lee was going to do next, because this chapter was over. Maybe Mr. Lee would save this girl in his own way. This video is over. Thank you for watching. I wish you all good health and good luck. Thank you very much.